Hello, everybody. Welcome to something which you've never done before on Last Word on Tennis. We're going to have kind of a coaching clinic here with Pablo, and we're going to talk about the clay courts because obviously we moved from the US Open straight into a mini clay swing here. And I've always wondered, as I wouldn't say that I'm a particularly professional tennis player, and I've always wondered the differences between moving from hard court into clay and what the differences are. So that's what I've asked Pablo a couple of weeks ago about this project, and you've kindly agreed to come on with me, Pablo. Maybe you'd like to start by introducing yourself and your background in tennis.
Hi Andy, thank you for having me here. Excited to make my debut here on your multimedia platforms here, Last Word on Tennis. I'm a tennis coach and also tennis writer. I've been playing tennis for 24 years. I'm 28, so 24 pretty much my whole life. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm the only Spanish writer on Last Word on Tennis, so that's why you call me.
That's why you're here, for the clay, not stereotyping at all.
Yeah.
Do we have any Spanish writers? Yes, we do. We'll choose him. I noticed you've got a racket. Is that for,
yeah,
for
for a mini racket for some visualization. I have a match later today, so
okay.
To practice while we talk, you know.
You told me you saved 4 match points the other day. Yesterday, was it? The day before?
Yeah, I'm actually playing a regional tournament here, but it's pretty minor. I'm not informed, and I'm still grinding out wins. So
still grinding them out.
Yeah.
Well, what type of tennis do you play then? Are you an attacking player, or are you more of a defensive type of player?
I've always been a defensive type of player, but I admire those who play all-out attack tennis. I wish I could play ultra attacking tennis. However, I used to be good in doubles, and I consider I'm still like pretty decent. So I love serving and volley and stuff, but when in singles, I grind people out. Yeah.
Right. We'll talk about obviously different types of tennis that can be successful on clay as we go through. We're just going to touch on a few different things. We want to know why clay. I'm going to ask you why clay is kind of so different as a surface and produces different results to the other surfaces that we play on. We talk about the makeup of the clay court, whether it's actually clay or not. I've never really known what the surface is. The differences in grips that you need to use when you're playing on clay as opposed to other surfaces. We'll obviously touch on Rafael Nadal. He's the king of clay after all. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can attack and get some final top tips in there for people who go and watch this and want to go out and play on the clay courts. So why do we bother even discussing this? A lovely picture of one of my favourite clay court players there, Gustavo Kuerten from Brazil. It does seem to produce, Pablo, a different like specialists like no other surface does. People talk about maybe grass court specialists, but often they're quite good hard courters as well. But clay courters seem to be a special type of player.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though in the past we used to have more specialists than now, it's definitely like a different type of tennis. Going from the hard courts in New York to Rome. Back at sea level on clay, you got to play more patient, and you got to do different things that you can't get by just on serve. But we'll get into that later. But definitely, it's not the same as playing on hard on clay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is true, that a lot of clay court players these days also are good on the hard court, but you still do get people getting quite high in the rankings, mainly based on winning the points on clay. And I've got an example of quite a few here. I just took this from Tennis Abstract, and this is the clay
Best
raw
website.
Yeah, clay raw ELO data, and obviously Rafael Nadal is at the top of that, which you would expect. And then you've still got your top players. If you're a brilliant tennis player, then you can play on clay. There's nothing to stop you from doing that, but it doesn't take very long to see that there's some specialists creeping in there. So Cristian Garin,
Yeah,
the Chilean player.
I'm surprised to see Berrettini that high. I know he had good results last year, but he doesn't strike me as the typical clay player. big serve, big forehand, but I think on clay you would be able to exploit his backhand weakness, but it's doing well, man.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're not in charge of this data. We could ask the Tennis Abstract guys to have a look at it, but it is surprising to see, like I said, Berrettini in that position. Other couple of players down here, Laszlo Gera, who won in the clay court and the Golden Swing last year.
Yeah, he won Rio. He won Rio, and he had a good tournament last week too in Kitzbühel. Yeah.
So, and then young Casper Ruud there, someone else who I always look out for on clay, and Nicolas Basilashvili, who's usually a bit lower down in the rankings, but has a really powerful game, and so power can work on clay as well as kind of good movement, I guess.
Oh, Basilashvili,
Yeah.
he hits huge on both wings, and I think he won Hamburg last year against Rublev in the final. I think he hits kind of flat. It's like a mini Soderling, you know. He has a big wind up and hits big of both wings, and that's what makes him good. When he's in form right now, he can't beat anyone because he has off the court issues. You know,
other things that are occupying his brain, I guess, at the moment for Nicolas. There is a variety of tournaments across the year. We talked about the Golden Swing a couple of times already. That's kind of a February, March sort of time usually in the season. In fact, it was just finished when we had the enforced break, and we've obviously missed out on quite a lot of the European swing. There's only a selected few tournaments there. That's the main clay court swing, and then there's others that kind of take part in the summer as well. Do you prefer watching clay court tennis, or do you like watching the faster stuff as a spectator?
As a spectator, I probably like the natural surfaces, clay and grass. I think you can construct points better on clay, and hard. Sometimes there's people who serve huge but don't have much else to offer, but still can get by. Where I like people who can offer more variety, you know. Yeah. So I tend to like clay. It's a pity that the Golden Swing has lost some prestige lately because it's competing with some important indoor tournaments or hardcore tournaments like Dubai or Rotterdam. So not many people go down to South America nowadays, but it's a great part of the year. And then obviously the European swing with all these masters like back to back pretty much. And that's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I obviously, being British, was brought up on Wimbledon, and then you see and Queens as well the week before Wimbledon. So you get brought up on this diet of hard, fast serving and short rallies and volleys, and you think that that's the way that tennis is played. And so it's only when you get older and you realise there's this vast world of other surfaces and other tournaments across the world that you kind of get used to it. And now I would say I would prefer clay court tennis because of point construction, because of the different skills that it takes to win a point on clay rather than just banging a serve down and finishing off at the net. So I've come to appreciate that, and I think people like one or the other. They don't tend to like both of those extremes. So it's interesting to see the different types. Do you have a favourite clay court tournament out of all of those, just before we move on?
Probably Barcelona. Yeah, it's because it's in Spain and it's sea level, and it's the one we've had for longer. I think we'll talk on later on that. But Madrid, it's a clay with asterisks.
Yeah, we'll talk about why that's different. So, how to play on clay then? Is it, first of all, I want to ask you, is it actually clay? Is the surface clay, or is it made up of all sorts of different things?
Well, that's out of my realm of knowledge. I know it's made of brick, but I don't know the details. Yeah.
Is that so? Just on that, actually, obviously, you said you were growing up from the age of 4 playing tennis. Was it always on clay courts that you played as a young player?
No, actually not. I grew up on hard. I grew up on hard, but started playing on clay after I was 11 or 12. I'm in the northwest region in Spain. It rains a lot, and we don't have many like indoor courts. So there are more outdoor hard courts here where you can play when it drizzles a little bit. But yeah, no, on clay.
You can certainly see why hard courts have become very popular. They're easy to maintain, and you
Yeah.
know, clay courts and grass courts are very difficult to maintain and take a lot of time. So you can see why hard courts have become more kind of popular to put down. So should we start by talking about? Well, I mean, we'll let you take over from now. Then you're the coach. You've got a picture of Rafael Nadal here, who's hitting the forehand. Is it the forehand grip that you want to talk about first of all?
Yeah, well, that's Nadal's grip. It used to be more Western, but now
What's
it's
Western?
more Western. Is it's like when
Okay.
you're showing the knuckles on the other side of the racket. We'll see Versategui later. That's very extreme. That's what Kashanov does now. Nadal switched to a more neutral one, to a more semi-Western, which is like what most people use nowadays, like Djokovic do. Um, so you see Nadal here is hitting the ball out in front of you, in front of the body, and a pretty high spot there, like at a shoulder level, high head level. That grip allows you to hit hard and also manipulate the ball well with spin and create angles, hit flat. You can do anything with that. You may struggle a little bit with a bit lower balls, but I think that's the go-to grip for most pros nowadays.
Yeah. So I was going to say, has that always been the case, or who kind of brought the Western, semi-Western stuff in? Was it Nadal, or was it even before him?
Oh, it was before, yeah. Well, back in the day, people used to play with the continental and eastern grips, and and in the 80s and 90s, people started introducing more westerns and close grips. We see like Alex de Minaur now, even though he was brought up in Spain, well, in Spain or Australia, but he's based in Spain and he's coached by a Spanish coach. He has a Eastern grip, and you can tell he's hitting a ball at a lower spot by the waist level and a bit behind him. So that's fine on hard, but on clay with the since the bounces tend to be higher, he struggles. He doesn't have, even though he's improving, he struggles with high balls, the forehand, and he I don't think he'll ever become an unreal tennis player on clay, despite his world-class speed. Sometimes we associate clay with defense and and raw speed, but Deminar has a flaw, and he can't control high balls there.
Yeah. So are you suggesting that this grip is about imparting top spin, or is it just, is that the main reason for having, why it's good on clay to have a kind of a Western, semi-Western grip?
Okay, so Versategui is like the most extreme grip like I've probably ever seen. That was a guy that used to play, used to cover the whole court with the forehand, because play used to be slower than it is now. So this guy and other guys who play with the Western grip, they could sit a couple meters behind the baseline and just run side to side, hitting forehands, applying huge topspin, opening up the court with angles. That's what this grip is good for. But the downside is that the strike zone is very small, because the racket face is closed except when you hit it. just right for the moment, right? So if you miscalculate just a tiny bit, you'll hit shanks, and it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, it's very good for topspin, but it's hard to hit flat, and it's hard to go. It's hard to hit good low balls.
Yeah. So in a situation like that, where let's say someone's played a shorter ball into Bersategui, what would he have to do coming forward in the court to try and get that back? Because there's no way he's hitting something that's down by even below his waist with a forehand like that. So what would he have to do?
Oh, he'd have to pretty much just sit on the court. He have to like bend his knees as much as he can, and try to like push it up.
So it's not a question.
Or he can slice. He
Yeah.
can slice, but he would be in a bad position. But Bersategui, he used to play like 80% of his ATP matches were on clay, and he barely touched grass, and he didn't even bother showing up for Wimbledon most of the years.
That was quite a trend. Yeah, that was a trend for a long time, is that a lot of players, after finishing Roland Garros, wouldn't even bother going to Wimbledon, I guess because they knew they weren't going to.
With that grip, it's impossible, because on Wimbledon, the balls are going to come quicker to you, and you're going to hit the ball behind, and with that grip, you don't have the power to do that.
So you've talked about the court speeding up, which allows, I guess, some people to be able to perform on all surfaces. And this is a quote from Nadal. Obviously, a lot of people labelled him as a clay court specialist in his early days because all of his best results came on clay. But I think this is from a few years ago now, that he said he was a complete player. He can play well on all the surfaces, but clay is still his easiest. And we do still to refer to him as the king of clay. And you've got a bit of him in practice here, I think.
Yeah, against Pablo Cuevas, like you see where he stands. He's far behind the baseline. He likes to start points off from behind the baseline, especially on return, but then moving in forward and dominate. Like Nadal used to be a defensive player, used to be a clay court specialist. If you watch his matches or highlights from when he became Nadal with capital N in 2005. Against Korea, those were grind fests. Like they could go for hours back-end to backhand, like forehand, cross court, and he didn't have the shots he has now. Like right now, he's a much more complete player, but he doesn't have the wheels he used to have. So he's more efficient. Right now, labeling him as a defensive player will be like ludicrous. Like he's a master of attacking tennis. That's his style.
So this was the grind fest that the type of grind fest that you would refer to here.
Yeah. So that match, you see, Nadal likes to like hit every ball with his forehand if he can, back in the day, and dominate from that. He has so much versatility, and you don't really know where he's gonna go. But back in the day, he used to go high to the backhand most of the time, so that way he overwhelmed Federer, and he could still push Coria out. And there was one point in this game where Coria hits an unreal cross-court backhand winner from 2 meters behind the baseline. But Nadal can live with that because tennis is a sport of percentages, So if they hit a winner from a impossible position, that's fine. But Nadal knows that most of the time he's going to have the upper hand.
So he plays the percentages really well. Obviously, very tactically astute and high tennis IQ for Nadal, and he's built that up over, like you say, 15 years, I guess, of professional clay court tennis. You described him as more attacking these days. Is it possible to attack on a clay court now and reap some rewards? I've got
yes.
So I've prepared this for you. You didn't know that this was coming, but I've, as a Brit, obviously, my first kind of not memories of Roland Garros, but the first time that I really took a lot of notice of Roland Garros was Tim Henman's run in 2004 to the semi-finals, and this is the semi-final against Coria. And you can see here he's doing some chipping and charging. He's trying to get to the net. He does some serve volley in this as well. And this was 2004, so I still think of that as relatively modern, but that's now 16 years ago. You still don't.
That's pre-Nadal, but you know, Coria was the ultimate clay courter back in that day. He was not very good off the dirt. I think he had a couple of the U.S. Open runs, or he was decent at the Masters Cup, but he was a clay courter, you know, and he was obviously a big favorite against Henman. However, Henman he played his cards very well, and he tried to. Well, he didn't rush the points, but he displayed his style very well. And at some point, in this match, he was just 6-3 and 4-2 up. He was up a set and a break on the favorite to win the French Open, but then he fell apart. He lost. I think he lost. I don't know, 13 games in a row. I think he lost 6-4, 6-0, and then he was down 3-0 in the fourth. And he came back in the fourth, and Coria ended up prevailing like 7-5 in the fourth.
Yeah.
But credit where it's due. Henman played a hell of a tournament there. No one expected him to be there. But yeah, you can definitely a very good attacking player can get by on clay. You know, it was not the first time. I think Patrick Rafter in the '97, he made the semis too. He lost to Bruguera. Probably one of the first matches I remember. But yeah, if you serve, especially if you serve with topspin, it gives you more time to get to the net. If you serve bombs, you depend on the bomb just hitting the line and getting a short ball. But if you have a big topspin serve, you can come in with the first and second and be effective. Yeah.
But in the end, in both the examples that you gave there, Rafter and Henman, the kind of clay courter won out in the end. But like getting to the semi-finals of Roland Garros is a very good result, I think, for anybody really, unless you're Nadal, or possibly Djokovic at the moment. Let's just round it off then with kind of your top tips. If you're going to kind of tell one of your students that they're going to like play on clay, what would be the couple of things, that the messages that you'd want to send out to the court with them?
Well, it would depend what level we're talking about. If it's a very competitive junior, I would tell him that nowadays the game is very homogeneous, because there's been an homogenization of the courts. Pretty much all the courts are the same except for grass. So we used to think about clay that you have to maintain your level for 5 hours and hit cross courts. That's still the case, but you gotta be very assertive with your first serve and first shot after your serve. You have a good return and very good first shot after your return. So I think nowadays pretty much everything in tennis boils down to the first 4 shots. So you need to be aggressive on your first couple shots. At the same time, if you are entangled in a rally, hit cross court until you get a short ball, and then you go down the line. If you hit down the line recklessly when you shouldn't, your opponent will slide, get there, and make you run the whole court and retrieve. So it's very important that you dominate the court with your forehand if possible. But
one thing you said there we haven't touched on actually, is actually quite a key part of clay court tennis that I am aware of, is the slide. People slide in a lot on hard courts these days as well, but it seems to originate on clay. Is that do you need to be able to slide to be successful?
Yes, because it helps you being efficient with your move. If you're able to slide while you hit, you're gonna get power off the legs and apply it to the ball. But at the same time, whereas if you don't slide, if you're hitting one extra step high level, that's gonna kill you. So, you know, people are evenly matched at that level, maybe except for Nadal. Okay, that one tiny step, half a second, is gonna kill you in a point. So it's very important to slide, and most people know how to slide on clay if they grow up on clay. And now Djokovic and Monfils and Demiao, they're adapting that to hardcore because it's more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. I play a lot of badminton, and movement is absolutely key in that sport as well. So I can understand why, yeah, cutting down half a step even somewhere along the baseline is going to really help you. And moving forward in the court as well, getting to those shorter balls, if you can slide and remain a stable balance at the slide as well, then that's perfect. Right, so thank you for spending time here. I've put your little joke name in at the end here. Is that in reference to the footballer?
Yeah, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. Yeah, former Chelsea and Atletico player. Yeah,
yeah.
He was
Okay.
He was a good forward.
I'm sorry that all your millions of fans will be able to maybe didn't realise that that was part of your name, and in fact, it isn't. It's Mosquera Perez. If they want to find you on ITF,
It's
which they
Mosquera
can,
Perez.
you can have a look at your illustrious career. On but thank you for joining us anyway today, Pablo.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Andrew. I'll go back to practicing.
Yeah, you go back to your office practice, and I'll speak to you again soon. Hopefully, we can do this again.
All right.
Sometime soon. Thanks, man.
Cheers.